I was doing another virtual event, and we were.
Yeah. Hello. Hello, and welcome to Word on the Street Great Book Stage. My name is Kate Freiman, and I will be your host during this next event, featuring Elisabeth de Mariaffi, Marissa Stapley, and Sandra S.G. Wong. Before we begin this event, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the history of the place where we are gathered today. The City of Toronto exists because of the Toronto Purchase, also known as Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation in 1805, with a final claim settlement in 2010. This territory is the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit to care for and share the resources around the Great Lakes in peace, which we all now share responsibility in upholding. The Dish with One Spoon was born in part out of the Anishinaabe concept of all our relations, which is the awareness that we are connected to and reflected in all the living and non-living beings around us. Toronto is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples with long histories on this land. And acknowledging this is only the first step in building a practice of land stewardship and Indigenous solidarity that honors these people. Now, first thing I'm going to do is welcome our authors. And after I've welcomed them, they will have a chance. I will read a brief bio of each of them. They will have a chance to read a brief passage from their current releases. And then I will kick things off with a question to all of them. And after they've done that, we are going to open this up to questions from all of you. So I'm going to welcome our authors. Elisabeth de Mariaffi. Hello.
Hello.
She is the author of The Retreat. She is a critically acclaimed author of 4 books, including her newest novel, The Retreat, about a dancer who must separate truth from lies in order to survive a deadly storm at a mountain arts retreat, which hit bookstores in July of 2021. Elisabeth makes her home in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. Marissa Stapley is the author of Lucky. You want to hold that one up? Marissa is the New York Times and national best-selling author of Lucky, the first Canadian Reese's Book Club pick. She's also the author of the best-selling books The Last Resort, Things to Do When It's Raining, and Mating for Life. Her journalism has appeared in newspapers and magazines across North America. Marissa lives in Toronto with her family. Sandra S.G. Wong, hello, from way across the country, is the author of In the Dark We Forget. She writes fiction across genres and is a multiple Crime Fiction Awards nominee. A speaker, mentor, and hybrid indie traditional author, Sandra is the immediate past president of Sisters in Crime and a proud member of Crime Writers of Color. So, who wants to go first?
I think Marissa should go first because she's right there.
I'm happy to go. Can everyone hear me? My mic is working. So I'm very happy to be reading from Lucky. I'm going to keep it short because we do have some rain here in Toronto. I'm going to read the opening passages of Lucky, which I wrote when I was about 2/3 of the way through the book and just couldn't figure out a way to make everybody in the world fall in love with this con artist because she was making bad choices and she was a criminal. And then I saw this thing online about extending love to your inner child. And I thought, oh, aha, I need to have a dual timeline with Lucky as a child. And it doesn't always happen with writing, but suddenly this vision came to me, and it felt very mystical. I saw this baby on the steps of a church, and it was nighttime, and it was cold, and there was this man coming down the street, and he was a con artist too, and he had shiny shoes, and he was handsome, and he was going to pick her up. She wasn't going to get the future of being taken in by the nuns, and she was going to be on her way. So I'm just going to read part of that scene, and this is where Lucky begins. Someone had left a baby outside the nunnery, and it was Margaret Jean's night to listen for the door. The rest of the sisters had their earplugs in and couldn't hear the wails that pierced the air, but still, she stayed motionless in her bed, hoping someone else would wake and relieve her of the drama. Margaret Jean touched the gold crucifix around her neck. She had been at the nunnery only a few months. She was still undergoing her aspirancy. The nuns were supposed to decide the following week if she could become one of their order. This was the first night she'd been left in charge, a test. She wasn't really Catholic. She'd forged a baptismal certificate. It had seemed like a brilliant con, her best one yet, to pose as a young woman seeking to pledge her life to the church. No one would ever look for her here. She would be safe, except she was expected to be a saint, and she wasn't one. The crying continued. It was freezing out there. The child could die. She forced herself to stand, pull on a cardigan, and move off down the hall, flashlight in hand. She pushed hard against the wind to open the front door. A little bundle rested on the middle stair, pink blankets, tiny fists, curled and shaking. Dear God, if only this could be someone else's problem, Margaret Jean found herself praying. This habit was as new as the one she had borrowed to wear tonight. Felt like a costume. There was a man walking along the sidewalk toward the cathedral. He stopped and stood at the base of the steps, listening, then walked up them while Margaret Jean stood still, watching. He knelt. He said something to the baby, but Margaret Jean couldn't hear what because of the wind and the crying. He lifted the baby into his arms, and she stopped wailing. Margaret Jean remained as still as possible. The man looked up at her. He was too handsome, like Cary Grant or Rock Hudson. She'd met this kind of man before, had the kind of intimate knowledge of men like this that nuns were not supposed to have. The elbows of his jacket were threadbare, but his shoes were mirror shiny. His hair was gelled so it barely moved in the wind. "I'm John," he said. "Sorry you were awakened by my child." "Your child?" "Yes, and here," he raised his eyes heavenward. "Thank God I found her. My wife, Gloria, has been struggling with, the baby blues. Tonight I went out to work, and when I returned, she was beside herself. She told me she'd gone and left the baby somewhere, a church. I didn't plan that baby crying, by the way. I've been walking around the city all night trying to find which, and now here she is, thank God." Margaret Jean looked down at the baby. "Your wife should seek help," she said. "Of course, I promise she will, but my wife deserves another chance. Don't all God's children deserve another chance, sister?" The way he was speaking to her, it was as if he knew her, as if he knew all about the second chances she did or did not deserve. She felt a wave of compassion for him, coming upon her as quickly as the bread delivery truck now barreling down the street, about to begin its early morning rounds. "I hope," she began, trying to think of the right thing to say, "that you and your family are blessed with good fortune." The man was looking at the gold crucifix around her neck. "I could use a little help," he said. "I could sell that gold. Is there any way you could spare it, sister, so we could pay for groceries?" The necklace was just a prop, real gold, but a prop nonetheless. She took it off and placed it on the baby. It felt good to do good, she realized, to give rather than take. She peered down at her. "What's her name?" A brief hesitation, but "Luciana," he said. "We named her after my mother." Margaret Jean chose to believe him. She placed her fingers on Luciana's brow and made the sign of the cross, just as the priest had done to her hours before during the Ash Wednesday service. "Your sins are forgiven," she said, raising her eyes to the man's. The problem with reading the Bible too often, day after day, the way an aspiring nun was required to, was that you started to believe miracles could happen anywhere, even in Queens. Margaret Jean imagined that she really had blessed the child and the man, that she was protecting them and would see them both again someday, that she had done the right thing. She bolted the door behind her and returned to her monastic cell, where she prayed for the baby and the man, prayed that they would be blessed, that they would be lucky. That's how Lucky's story begins.
Thank you. That was wonderful. And I I read all the books, and that double timeline works beautifully. It really did. Sometimes, yeah, you're in the middle of something and you go, oh,
Right.
it's the V8 moment.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, who wants to read next?
Sandra, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, great. Thank you, Elisabeth. Hi, everybody. I am going to read from the beginning of In the Dark We Forget, mostly because the protagonist has amnesia, so I don't want to get too far in and spoil anything too quickly. So let me just find the beginning. Begin at the beginning. Okay, 1. I awake with a shiver, full on from toes to the tingling roots of my scalp. Sharp corners dig into my shoulders, down the length of my spine, underneath one set of ribs. My feet twitch. I feel the backs of my shoes slip on something wet. Shoes. Why am I wearing shoes while I sleep? I push up on my elbows, can't hold myself up, fall back with a thump onto those sharp corners again. I blink up at a murky sky. My head aches like I've taken a chill. I hear a soft rustling of leaves, a lone chirping bird. My ears are cold. A slight breeze blows grit into my cheek. My eyes widen. Why am I outside? This time I roll to hands and knees first, then push up to kneeling. Those sharp rocks now dig into my palms. My knees hurt like they're bruised, deep. I catalog stiffness and aching all over. My body like a muscle stretched too far, now snap back. I rest my hands on my thighs, stare down at them while I catch my breath. Too dark. I lift my hands up, close to my eyes. I don't know what I'm looking for. A few more chirping birds join the first. I scan the dimness around me. The sky seems lighter to my left. The skin at the nape of my neck tightens into goose flesh. I turn slowly, feeling a weight on my back. A black silhouette rises impossibly high. A mountain, scratch that, a mountain range. Peaks and long angular lines run as far as my incredulous eyes want to look. A thick forest of tall trees skirts its base, dark and impenetrable. The shiver returns as I stare into the depths of the darkness. How silently it would swallow me whole. I pull my gaze back to the ground around me. No tent, no campfire ring, no sleeping bag, so I'm not camping. A slope in front of me, heading upward. It looks green-ish. I check the sky to my left again. Is this dawn? I push to my feet, wincing at the sharp pain in my shins, brushing off dew from the slippery fabric of my pants. My seat doesn't feel damp, just cold. I rub my arms, encased in a slippery, lightweight fabric. I unzip just enough to feel the 2 layers of cotton shirts beneath. At least I dressed for a night out of doors, I guess. I don't understand this. How am I here? Where is here? What? I scramble up the slope, slipping a few times on the damp grass, desperate to do something. My head is suddenly pounding, my mouth foul and gummy. The grass beneath my feet gives way to gravel and asphalt. 2 paved lanes on either side of a faded yellow line stretch away from me, left and right. East and west, then, judging by the rising light of the sky. I hold my face, willing the cold of my hands to seep down into my chest, to slow my racing heart. Should I recognize this place? I should. I must. I got here somehow, right? I stare down the dark road, first one way, then the other. The sun may be rising, but it's mostly behind the enormous mountains that seem to cut off the left end of the long ribbon of highway. I strain my ears. Birdsong, louder and more insistent now. More leaves rustling in a light breeze. A pressing silence in between. A shudder runs through me, uncontrollable. My toes curl painfully inside my shoes. My mouth fills with saliva. I swallow several times. My guts twist a second before I bend over abruptly and heave. Nothing but a thin stream of bile and spit. I stand, knees apart, propping myself up with my hands, panting like a sick dog, and stare at the slick patch of vomit on the asphalt in front of my battered running shoes. Walking, I should be walking somewhere. I need to move. I need to find help. I need to get away. My skin pebbles with goosebumps. The hair's standing on end. I swivel my head every which way, trying to pinpoint where this sudden foreboding is coming from. There's nothing, and no one. Clumsily, I wipe my mouth, my chin, my cheeks, then scrub my sleeve on the dewy grass. I scrub my fingers along my scalp, trying to get rid of the sensation of ants. I feel the pull of a ponytail, gone loose now, the elastic pulled almost to the end. I undo the tail, fully tearing out strands in my haste. Hair past my shoulders, heavy, sweeping along the synthetic shell I'm wearing. I pull it all back into a tight bundle, secure it with the elastic, put in a few twists, tuck in the ends. I feel something like familiarity as I tap the bun riding high at the back of my head. But it loosens suddenly, slipping through my fingertips. I redo it all into a loose bun at the nape of my neck instead, grasping at the small bit of comfort from how normal it feels. I stare again down the still empty highway, fighting the distress just behind the insistent thud of a worsening headache. A wave of fatigue hits me. I blink against the rush of pressure behind my eyes. My brain fills again, this time with questions. Where am I? How did I end up here? And why is this happening? I scour my memory for any hint of a clue, find nothing but a thick blankness, shot through with threads of unease. Chest tight, I pat at my pockets, fumble stiff hands inside, come up empty. No phone, no wallet. How do I get home with no money? Oh God, I don't even know where home is. I close my eyes, prodding at the blackness in my head for an address, an image of a house, anything, a bill or a driver's license. Sweet Jesus. I don't know what I look like. I don't know my name. Frantic, I spin on my heel, my gaze everywhere, hummingbird-like, as though a name might be darting just past my field of view. If only I could snatch it quickly before it disappears. Oh, I'm panting again. My stomach flutters. I press a hand against my abdomen, take slow, deep breaths, grimace at the smell of my breath in the morning air. Who the hell am I? No, stop it. I need to be in motion. I know precious little right now, but damned if I'm going to stand here waiting for someone else to save me. Ignoring the trembling of my limbs, I turn myself away from the bright sky. I put one foot in front of the other, toward the still gray west. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Elisabeth, would you share, please?
For sure. It's so fun to be here, even like beaming in. Although in some ways it's worked out because we have a beautiful sunny day in St. John's. I'm going to be reading from this book, The Retreat, which came out last summer. So I'm just kind of finishing up this kind of tour stuff. And I'm just going to read a short passage from it. But you need to know just a couple of things. So The Retreat is about a dancer, Maeve Martin, who has sort of almost lost her career. She was a very high-level dancer who also had a very disastrous marriage to her artistic director, and she's managed to escape that marriage. She's now a single mother, and motherhood itself has really threatened her career because her second child was born by cesarean section. And that surgery, even though it's really normalized for most of us for a professional dancer, can be a real career ender. So Maeve has gone off to an arts retreat high in the mountains. And what she's doing there, she's got a grant for that is only for people under 35. She's 34. And she's got 2 weeks. And in those 2 weeks, what she wants to do is craft a kind of artistic vision of her own so she can start her own company, because that's going to be the best thing she can do. So Maeve gets there to the High Water Center for the Arts, and immediately things are a bit strange. They've had really weird weather. They've had snow and then rain, and then, more snow is starting. She's there kind of between programming semesters, so there's only a handful of artists and staff there. And the people who are there know each other quite well. At first, she tries to kind of go with the flow. She finds a friendship with another woman, and even has a one-night stand with a very compelling installation artist. But as the snow starts to get heavier, she's left her kids behind, which is always really hard to do when we're trying to pursue our own art, and she begins to feel more and more trapped. And at night, she starts to be really plagued by these dreams of a bear. And she finds out from somebody else at the retreat that these dreams are actually quite legendary in that area of the mountains. So that's where we're at. So this is just a couple of pages of Maeve at the retreat. When it comes this time, she can see it. It's dark fur. Maeve is sure she must be awake. First, the smell of it, wetness and musk, a bog smell, a sex smell, washing in like a heavy wave. And then it's already there, coming at the window. She can see the blackness in its eyes. The pressure in the room hurts her head. Maeve tries to pull up in bed to stand, but she's so tired. Her shoulders burn, her muscles won't work, her bones won't support her. She's weeping with the effort. If she doesn't get up, she will never get home to Rudy and Talia. She has to get home to save them. The bear is coming for them too. The deadbolt moves in the latch. Her door bursts open. A rush of wind pins her down. Maeve finds herself pressed flat, trapped, and the bear is right outside her window, coming at her with the sound of a train. There's an explosion of shattering glass, and then it's on her, its long claws slicing her skin. Maeve pushes up, gasping for breath. She's leapt out of bed in her sleep, disoriented. She looks around. There's a swirl of white at the window, but the glass is intact. To the other side, the door is closed and locked, just as she left it. Her arm stings, and Maeve sees that she's bleeding. She knocked into the bedside lamp, knocking it on her way down. The jagged edge of a shard of china is still lodged in her skin. She takes hold of it with 2 fingers and pulls it out, and the room spins. For a moment, she thinks she will vomit, and she bends her head to her knees. In the bathroom, she stands over the sink, mopping at her arm with a wet face cloth. Then she rinses and squeezes it out and presses it to her forehead instead. She takes a drink and looks at herself. So, that's the dream. The bathroom light, a soft white over the mirror, flickers a little. She looks pale. She looks like an old-time movie star, harrowed and lit from above. Then the light blinks out. Thank you.
Well, it's pretty obvious that these are 3 very, very different stories. But, in fact, when I was reading them, what I saw was that betrayal is a theme that propelled all 3 of your novels. Was this a conscious choice before you began writing? Or did this develop as the story and the characters took shape? Who wants to start? Yeah, you can start.
I mean, I think with Lucky, I started out, I wanted to explore, I had just reread Les Miserables, and I wanted to explore being good versus being bad according to the constructs of society, and what happens to you when you make mistakes. And I think the betrayal came secondary. It wasn't necessarily something that I planned, but it was also something necessary to the story of a character like Lucky, because as I said at the beginning, this is a crime caper. It's not a dark thriller. It's not like my previous novel, The Last Resort. So I wanted it to be really fun. I wanted it to be a roller coaster ride, and I wanted my readers to fall in love with Lucky the way that you fall in love with con artists, unfortunately. So I think the betrayal came as a way to curry sympathy for Lucky and that theme. But then it introduced that secondary theme of forgiveness and how much can a person forgive? How much betrayal can a person withstand and then potentially forgive in life?
Yeah, I'll just jump in. First, too, I wanted to say thank you so much to Word on the Street Toronto, because this is my Word on the Street Toronto debut. I hope it counts, even though it's virtual. I got so excited, I jumped right into my reading, because anyway. So it is a story about a woman who has to discover her own identity, and in doing so, she discovers that her parents have vanished. And also that her parents are the winners of a multi-million-dollar lottery jackpot. So family and family relationships were very integral to this story. And I think that it naturally then betrayal becomes a really powerful theme because families are like that, or they can be like that. They're our first tight relationships. And I didn't consciously think betrayal would have to be a theme, but it did happen that in exploring the complicated relationships between the protagonist and one of her parents in particular, that would come out, that betrayal would come out as a theme.
Jump in. I think I thought it was actually very interesting that you think about betrayal as a theme, and I don't know that I was thinking about betrayal when I was writing Maeve. The most important thing about Maeve is that she is completely out of her element, that she's really alone. And I think part of what I wanted to explore with that was that notion of having to start again, right? So that after we have a divorce, or in her case, she's got a lot of starting again, right? She's starting again after a divorce. She's starting again after a certain phase of her career, and trying to build something completely new without that kind of roadmap, that security. And then she goes to this place that is really different from anywhere she's ever been. She's used to the city, and now she's in the mountains. That sequence that I read, what's actually happening, the sound of the train that's woken her up, she ends up going out to the common room and she finds everybody else is awake. And they're all sitting there, and there's been an avalanche. So they're now trapped at the retreat and cut off from the village below. So at every stage of the novel, she sort of becomes more and more alone. And as soon as she starts to forge connections with someone, here's where the betrayal comes in, I guess. People aren't exactly what they seem. But I think for all those people, they're not what they seem because they're navigating their own fear and anxiety for the most part, and trying to control it in whatever way they can. But after the avalanche, they're all trapped there, and then people start dying. So someone's not handling things well.
I think too, like at some level, don't you think, Marissa and Elisabeth, that like when we're writing these strong characters, at some level we're wondering as writers, are they going to be facing their own self-betrayal at some point, and how are they going to deal with that? Will they betray their own values? Will they betray who they say they love, for example, to do something? Wouldn't it be natural that we would put them in that sort of situation?
I think that's
yeah, absolutely. There's a point in this novel where, as I said, Maeve has this one-night stand, and the guy that she has the one-night stand with sort of says to her point blank, so who are you really? Are you a mother or an artist? And she doesn't want to answer the question, because to her it's a non-question. But I think that becomes kind of this insidious little dagger that's in her side. That's exactly what she's afraid of, right? It's exactly what she's afraid of when she goes away and leaves her kids behind to go do this, that she's somehow abandoning them in order to do something for herself. Instead of, I think, knowing in her heart what is really true, which is that to be whole, she must do everything. She must do it all, right?
I was just going to say, too, a lot of readers said that they saw Lucky's ultimate con as being on herself, because she did convince herself of certain things that were not true in order to carry on. And I think, it happens with many characters as we take them on the journey. You're absolutely right about that. There is a moment where suddenly they're sort of in the driver's seat, and it's often at the moment when they should not be in the driver's seat. And the story is interesting and exciting, but you're kind of sitting there going, okay, but how far until I step in and save them? Or do I,
Or do I?
Or
yeah.
do I?
But of course, the author is never supposed to save them. They have to save themselves. And sometimes that's the hardest thing they ever have to do. I saw Lucky as sort of the victim of nurture over nature. And okay, I'll admit it, I'm an old academic, so I'm just wondering if you intended that, and if there was a sort of greater message in that as to the nature of crime. Because, I mean, she and her adoptive father can't seem to go more than 5 minutes without committing one.
True. I thought about nurture versus nature a great deal when I was writing Lucky. As my kids get older and become teenagers, you sort of start to feel like it's out of your hands. So you're nurturing, you get fewer opportunities to do that. And so I was thinking, and then you kind of look around at other people and their children, and you think sometimes, well, they're so great. They've clearly nurtured these incredible children. Or, wow, these people are so great, and this kid is going off the rails. So it's a question that was often in my mind, absolutely, as I created Lucky. But you're right, that criminal element, I think the book We Need to Talk About Kevin is often in my head about a child who's ultimately a sociopath and commits horrific crimes for no reason. And when we see these terrible crimes enacted by young people, you have to wonder, is it nurture or is it nature? And I couldn't stop thinking about that. And then, on a less horrific level, because, as I said, the book is more of a con artist caper, was Lucky really in control when she was committing crimes? And I think it's, with Lucky, there's a weird balance. It's so great to watch people do their thing when they're good at something. Like, we all loved watching Beth Harmon in The Queen's Gambit play chess, even if we didn't love chess, because she was so damn good at it. And it's the same thing with Lucky. She's so good at being a con artist. Isn't there a part of her that, even if her nature is ultimately good, isn't it fun to be great at something, even if it's criminal?
I think once you've been conned, it's no longer attractive.
Very true. And I don't know why I love watching a con artist TV show or a movie, but in real life, and all the research I did, I realized most con artists are sociopaths, and it's not fun. But it is fun on the page for some reason. I don't know why. It is.
Yeah, because it doesn't touch you. No, and Sundance and the kid do get it in the end. But yeah, it is a peculiar kind of balance, and I think that while we don't know, John is a total blank slate. We don't know anything about his nurture or nature.
It's funny you say that. I know everything about his, and I put some of that on the page.
Yeah.
I know, but you know, that's my job. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But it's not really necessary for us to know him, how he got to be who he is. But we can see how he groomed Lucky. But we also can see how she's not totally comfortable with it.
Right. And it comes when you say nature versus nurture. So she does have that. I don't want to give too much. There is something in her nature that's there that is telling her this is not where you belong.
It comes out when she's betrayed by a con. and she realizes that's what other people feel.
Right.
And I think that's very, very interesting. Okay, I have a question for Sandra. Cleo is such a flawed person, and yet
Is she though?
she is, oh yes, and yet she's so courageous, and you never pull your punches with her. What I would like to know, as a sister author who writes romance, because I love a happy ending and I like nice people, what was it like having her in your head while you were writing this story? Because I have to tell you, pardon my language, Cleo is a bitch on wheels.
In all honesty, it was a hoot. It was, I mean, because I mean, I don't know what it's like for other authors, but yeah, I'm guessing, right? We all live with our characters for as long as we're writing the books, if it's a series or whatever. And just as a side note, Kate, I also write romance, so maybe there's this like partition in my writer brain. But with Cleo, the most fun I had was, excuse me, discovering who she was sort of at the same time that she did as a person with amnesia and trying to recover her identity. Excuse me. And then at some point, recovery became, I should say, it was discovery, became recovery, became, is this really what I want to be? Is this who I still want to be if I have to be someone in the world? So it was fun. I mean, I would like to think I am not a bitch on wheels in real life. I mean, I don't know. Maybe other people think I am, which is fine. It's fair. Because, you know, I mean, also, seriously, you know, that description, who is that usually applied to? It's usually applied to strong women who know who they are, what they want. So that wouldn't be so terrible, to be honest. But I had a lot of fun writing her. Yeah.
Okay. I have one last question. I'm really curious about this. Elisabeth, I got the impression from some of your author notes that you are not a dancer. Is that correct?
No. Yeah, not at all.
Okay, so what I want to know is, what is it about dance that gave you the metaphors and motifs in your story?
Oh, well, I mean, I settled on dancer probably in the beginning. You know, I had this idea of wanting to send her to an artist's retreat because they're kind of very strange places. Everyone arrives there, you're on limited time, it's obsessive, and yet there's this bizarre social requirement, right? So so people kind of arrive and they're social for a few days, and then they realize the clock is ticking, and everyone kind of shuts their door and tries to create something. So there's a lot. It's like a pressure cooker, right? So I definitely wanted her to do that, and I definitely didn't want her to be a writer, because I don't know. It just I've written a reporter before. I kind of don't want to be a writer who writes writers if I can avoid it, at least for now. So. Then I thought about what she could do, and I was really fascinated by the body work that a dancer has to do, and so I kind of fell into making Maeve a dancer. And then the more I thought about it, the more I realized that was like thematically a fantastic thing for her to do. So I had already decided she was going to be a dancer, and I was very lucky. I have two friends, one of whom studied with Alvin Ailey when she was young, and one of whom has a lifetime as a dancer, a childhood friend who's a lifetime dancer. And I met with her when I was first starting to work on the book, and she shared with me some video of herself doing exactly what Maeve's doing at the retreat, creating work by herself, and she had set up the video camera. And as we talked about it, she sort of told me her story. She does run her own company now, and it was as a result of having had a child by C-section. And so I had no idea, right, that was that much of a career ender for a dancer. She said, no, you can't, you can never get your core muscles back in the way that you would need to dance. So now I got really fascinated by that. Maeve has been in a marriage that was, violent, but also emotionally abusive, controlling. So she was sort of living with that, and at the same time has had, her lifetime as a dancer from when she was 4 years old kind of ripped away from her, really taken from her. So what do you do when you only know how to move your body? What do you do? So I'm not a dancer, and I don't, and I had to like talk to my friends to try and figure out like, what would you be thinking in your head while you're trying to create this? But I am a lifelong distance runner, and so I've been a distance runner since I was 15, which is, I don't want to do the math, very, very long time. It's amazing my knees still work. So I was able to kind of connect with Maeve that way in terms of what would I do if I couldn't run? I mean, everybody in my house would be driven right around the bend for sure, because it's how I think. It's it's my way of getting out in nature and all these things that I do to sort of center myself often come back to running. So when I was writing Maeve, I was again thinking about that. One of the things that Maeve says frequently in the book is she refers to herself as an athlete. And I think we're so used to seeing ballerinas, Maeve starts in ballet, ballerinas as pretty things. And those are the words that we apply to that, the beautiful, graceful, you think about the ballerina in the music box, right? And it's really this very delicate, pretty thing, when in fact a dancer is just muscle and ambition and discipline, and it is one of the most athletic pursuits, right? So for Maeve to be trapped there in the mountain in an avalanche situation with, as it turns out, an actual real bear stalking them and also a human killer potentially trapped inside with them, she's the ideal person, because she has this incredible mental fortitude and physical fortitude from a lifetime of training. So those are all the things I was thinking about. I hope I answered the question.
Okay, yeah. Now, who has questions for our authors? Yes. You'll have to speak up. Were you able to hear that? Okay, so about identity being a key theme for your characters. So how did you go about shaping their identities? Or how did they go about it? Sandra, I think this one's
I'll take a
in your wheelhouse.
That's a very violent way to say I'll try it. So I think I created a family for my character based on experiences that I knew about. So an immigrant family raising children in Canada, and what is that like? What are the tensions there? What are the differences of opinion that get settled and the ones that fester? And what does it look like when they fester and finally burst? Sunday, I don't know what's going on with my head, but for me, experiences I've had, experiences I know of children of immigrants, of first-gen immigrants to Canada. What is that like? What are the microaggressions that we encounter? How do we deal with them? When do we deal with them? How does that affect us? So all those things, for me, my characters are real people for, not just when they're in my head, also when they're out pouring out on the page and ever after. I think that it's just really fun when they surprise me. Usually it's fun, sometimes it's not. It's a lot of cursing involved because they do the things I don't want them to do that make it easy for me as a writer. But in terms of this character, very much personal experience and then experience of people that I know, and a healthy dose of imagination, to go to an extreme. I don't want to spoil too much about what happens, but as I said earlier, family fascinates me. Writing about family, I think, is infinitely fascinating. So also not only the main character, but the characters of all the people around her. Again, taken from my imagination mostly. As a rule, I don't base characters, even if they're secondary or minor, on people that I actually know. I just want to avoid hurting people's feelings, because inevitably someone will think a character is them when it's not them. And no matter how often you say, no, that's really not you, they may be determined to think that it is, and it may not be totally flattering. So I avoid real people, and I just play in my head. I hope that answers that question.
I think because we've all now heard the opening passages of Lucky, you know that Lucky's identity is not something that she is aware of. It's stolen from her right from, moments after she was born. So the entire Lucky's whole journey is about her searching for her own identity, but there are so many red herrings and so many things that she thinks, okay, here it is, here is my mother, here is my identity, here is my dream, even here's what I want for my life, and it's never really, things are never really what they seem for Lucky until ultimately she does have to save herself and figure that out. So I think identity was a huge part of her journey, but she was just constantly searching. And of course we know something about her that she doesn't know along that way.
Yeah, and I think, as I said earlier, identity is actually hugely important to Maeve in this book, because she is sort of leaving behind all the knowns and trying to forge something new. So the only way to do that is to really center yourself and figure out who you are. And I think so much of the book has to do with Maeve finding that inner strength, both a physical strength and a mental strength, to kind of overcome all these sort of wild things that she ends up living through. But because she has come out of this marriage that was very controlling, she's left her kids with her mother. Her mother's a somewhat, she's a secondary character for sure, but she's a somewhat problematic figure. And we have the sense that the mother was perhaps quite controlling in Maeve's childhood as well. And so she's sort of coming out of all that and having to center herself, despite, I think, a lot of messaging. So when she is asked, what are you, a mother or an artist? That's the question that society is pummeling her with, right? The fact that she's decided to do this. So I think for Maeve, being confident in asserting her identity and asserting boundaries, is the thing that's going to allow her to survive this experience ultimately. In terms of how I crafted that identity, it's interesting listening to Sandra talk. I think we all kind of lean on personal experience of one kind or another. So I really did go to an artist colony when I was newly a single mom and had to leave my kids, and there were no killers there. It was fine. But I did have that experience. I'm having to make a decision, and for me that decision was that I was going to put my writing first, that the writing had to be taken so seriously because everything else in my life was so serious and the stakes were so high that if I didn't prioritize that, if I didn't center myself and my own identity, it was going to be so easy to just lose it. And to prioritize everything else. And among that was my children, who were a real priority for me. There's no question. But I really wanted to make this life work where I got to be a writer and they got to be well cared for. And I figured there had to be a way to do those things, but the only way I could do it was if I really took a stand and prioritized myself. So that's a little bit where Maeve came from.
Oh, you know, it really struck me listening to both you, Elisabeth, and you, Marissa, talking about the books and Maeve and Lucky was like a related theme to identity, which is, of course, what other people think of your characters and how, you know, the tension between themselves. So Lucky is like, well, who, at some level, she's like, who am I? I don't know, right? But who does everyone else think she is? And then for Lucky, clearly, what everyone else thinks she is so tied into what she does, conning people. And then with Maeve, it's like, you know, that question that you said, someone asks her, are you a mother and an artist? That just like, right to my heart. Because again, I think we all have children. The three of us have children. And then there's the writer life. And I think that speaks to so many of us in this situation where the identity of our characters is very much in tension with what's expected of them and what's put upon them, whether it's family, whether it's society, whether, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So that really struck me too.
Well, not to be sexist about it, but, you know, a man traditionally never had to ask himself, am I a writer or a father? Am I a lawyer or a husband? He never had to ask that question. It's only those of us of the female persuasion who get asked. And I don't think that question comes from us. I think it comes from outside. Are you a mother or an artist? Well, you know, I think being a mother informs your art, or not being a mother informs your art. Your life informs your art. You know, that's a false question. And I think that we need to stop, you know, when someone asks you that, I think you need to just give them a hairy eyeball and say, that's a dumb question. You know, that's not a valid question. Next. Move on. You know? Okay, so maybe Cleo isn't the only bitch on wheels here. Any other questions from the audience? We have a few more minutes. Oh, good, we have a mic.
Does it work? Yes. So that would be a question for Marissa, writing about the con woman. Have you actually met people like this in real life, or somebody who especially inspired you to create this character?
No, but it's funny. I was thinking more about the identity question. I remember sitting down with my editor, and she said, you know, of all the characters you've created, I feel like Lucky is the one who's most like you. And I was so upset. And I went home and I said to my husband, I can't, she obviously doesn't like me and she thinks I'm like a scammer. And he was like, no, you are you're relentless. Like you never give up and you always are trying new things. And he saw that. So, I mean, I guess I channeled some of that into, I'm not a con artist, but no, I was not inspired by anyone I met, but I was certainly inspired by the research that I started to do. And something very interesting I found out about the reason we have con artists in society. And as you said, and I kind of got the sense there was a story there, like as soon as you've been conned, you do not love a con artist caper, but we have this strange admiration, I think maybe less and less because cons are now like phishing scams and they're just awful and not creative at all. But I read a book called Confident Women by a woman named Tori Telfer, all about con women through the ages, which was great because we know all the con men and we've heard all about them, but women getting their due. And she said in her intro, we can have con artists because we as a society trust each other. There's this undercurrent of trust. It runs through everything we do. So when you meet a new person, you choose to trust that they're not conning you. And because of this trust, con artists can operate, which is sad, but also beautiful. And also because we all go through life choosing not to con each other, we have this weird thing in our souls where we are like, oh, that's kind of impressive though, because I could do that. And I wonder if writers all the time are like, man, I could, like, if it's all about coming up with a good story, I've got the story. Like I'm ready to. So, I was inspired to explore that. But I have to tell you, it is incredible the things people will fall for because of what they want most. Like there was a woman who believed she'd met Bruno Mars online and that he needed $100,000 to finish his tour, and then they'd be together, and she gave him $100,000. I mean, so it's just fascinating, and there's so many stories. And I don't think inspired by that is the right word, but like fascinated, just fascinated.
Yeah. Well, in some ways, storytellers are con artists. We make you believe in our characters. But ultimately, we're not trying to get anything out of you.
Well, I mean, $20 for a book.
Well, yeah. But the reward is so much greater than the $20 for the book. Any more questions? We have 5 minutes. We got a 5-minute question. Some comments from our authors.
I want to quickly say that I find every time I do an event and you're always like, how are these books going to fit together? And then I do feel like there are those common themes, and then the family and motherhood current that does run through them. I thought that was an interesting common thread for the three of us too.
And
Definitely.
interesting too. This event is called Under Pressure, and so I think we've touched upon under pressure from within for our characters, under pressure from society, under pressure from family. So maybe that's too broad of a theme, but it seemed to really fit the three books of ours.
Definitely. Well, I power read all three, one after the other, and so I clearly saw the connections, not just the betrayal, but definitely the family, and it's not just the birth family; it's the created family, family ties, family tensions, and the strength that's required to know yourself and to find out who you are. All of the characters had to put themselves together in some way, whether they knew who they were or not. Two of the characters didn't know who they were. One of them thought she did and had to fight her way to find out who she really was. So, yeah, definitely threads throughout all three, and yet so very different.
If there are any academics in the audience for watching this on recording, you can put these three books on your curriculum.
What an essay. Draw, compare, and contrast
Yes.
these three novels.
Right.
Instant MA thesis right here. Okay, well, I guess we can wrap this up. Yes. So on behalf of Word on the Street, I'd like to thank you all for attending and braving the weather. And I'd especially like to thank our authors for attending from far away, and Marissa for so far away in Toronto. Well, my notes say that you'll be signing copies of your books, but at another story bookshop, which is just next door. But I think you will be.
I'm a good forger. If you guys want, I can. I've learned the trade. I can.
Okay, so up next is a conversation with Zara. Oh, I have a typo in here. Zarka Nawaz. She's going to speak about her new novel, which is a wonderful title, Jamila Green Ruins Everything. I love that title. I guess that is it for now. And thank you again for attending. And I definitely recommend that if you get all 3 books, you read them all, power read through all of them to see the similarities and just enjoy the experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.